What if your perfect life was a deadly illusion? Elena discovers her husband's affair with his mistress during a pregnancy checkup text, promising a future without her. But that's just the start of this midlife betrayal story. He plots to fake her death, pushing her toward a cliff in a storm. She survives, returns, and ruins him with revelations of hidden children and fraud. Yet, the final twist, he orchestrated it all for reasons that will chill you. Secrets, despair, empowerment, don't miss a second. Like if twists excite you, comment your predictions, share the suspense, and subscribe to uncover more. Elena Thompson clutched the ultrasound photo with trembling fingers as she sat in the passenger seat of her husband's gleaming Mercedes. At 45, this pregnancy was nothing short of a miracle. After years of trying and countless failed attempts, she had finally conceived the child she and Victor had dreamed of for so long. The heartbeat is strong, Mrs. Thompson, Dr. Martinez had said just minutes earlier, his warm smile radiating genuine joy. Everything looks perfect for 22 weeks, but perfection, Elena was about to discover, was nothing more than an illusion. As Victor stepped out to take what he claimed was an urgent business call, Elena noticed his phone buzzing on the dashboard. The screen lit up with a text message that would shatter her world into a million pieces. Can't wait to start our life without her. Just a few more months and we'll be free. The message was from someone named Sophia. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her hands began to shake as she picked up the phone, scrolling through message after message that revealed a heartbreaking family drama she never saw coming. Photos of intimate dinners, romantic getaways, and promises of a future together painted a picture of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. At 45, I thought our marriage was my rock, Elena whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the sound of rain beginning to patter against the clinic window. Now it's crumbling like my dreams of a perfect family. The pregnant wife betrayed scenario was one she had seen in movies, read about in novels, but never imagined would become her reality. Not after 20 years of marriage. Not when she was carrying their child. Victor returned to the car, his charming smile the same one that had won her heart 2 decades ago. He was a successful millionaire entrepreneur, owner of Thompson Industries, a man who commanded respect in boardrooms across Chicago. But looking at him now, Elena saw a stranger. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" he asked, starting the engine. "You look pale. Who's Sophia?" The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them. Victor's hands tightened on the steering wheel for just a moment, so briefly that she almost missed it. Then his expression shifted to one of confusion, perfectly practiced. "Sophia, I'm not sure what you mean. Elena, are you feeling okay? Pregnancy hormones can make you imagine things." The gaslighting stung worse than the betrayal itself. This man, the father of her unborn child, was treating her like she was losing her mind. Elena felt the familiar creep of midlife insecurities that had plagued her for months. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of this late-in-life pregnancy was affecting her judgment. But the messages were real. The photos were real. The husband affair with Mistress scenario playing out on his phone screen was undeniably real. "I saw the messages. Victor, on your phone." The silence that followed was deafening. When Victor finally spoke, his voice was cold, calculated. "You went through my phone, Elena. That's a serious violation of privacy. I'm disappointed in you." Somehow he had turned this around to make her the villain. Elena pressed her hand to her growing belly, feeling the baby kick as if sensing her distress. She needed support, someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't make her question her own sanity. That evening, Elena called her best friend Marie, a fellow book club member who had been her anchor through every major life event for the past 15 years. "I need to see you," Elena said, her voice thick with tears. "Can you meet me at Brewster's Coffee tomorrow morning?" Marie's concern was immediate. "Of course, honey. What's wrong?" "I think my marriage is over." The next morning, Elena found herself across from Marie in their favorite corner booth at Brewster's, the same spot where they had dissected countless novels and shared their deepest secrets. Marie's silver hair was perfectly styled, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. At 52, she radiated the confidence Elena desperately needed. I feel like I'm living in one of those eat, pray, love moments, Elena confessed, stirring her decaf coffee absently. You know, when Elizabeth Gilbert's world fell apart and she had to rediscover who she was. Marie reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Tell me everything. Elena spilled out the details of the text messages. Victor's denial, the growing suspicion that her husband's affair with Mistress was more serious than a simple fling. Marie listened without judgment, her expression growing more concerned with each revelation. Elena, honey, this isn't your fault. A pregnant wife betrayed by her husband isn't the victim here. You are strong, you are valuable, and you deserve so much better than this. But what if I'm wrong? What if the pregnancy hormones are making me paranoid? Victor's right about the financial dependence. I haven't worked in 10 years. I have no income, no savings of my own. How could I survive as a single mother at 45? Stop right there, Marie said firmly. You are not trapped. You have options. You have friends. You have strength you don't even know about yet. Their conversation was interrupted by Elena's phone buzzing. A text from Victor. Dinner at Romano's tonight, 7 p.m. We need to talk. Elena's stomach churned. Romano's was where Victor had proposed 20 years ago. The choice of venue felt either romantic or ominous, and she couldn't decide which. That evening, Romano's felt different. The soft lighting that once seemed romantic now felt dim and foreboding. Victor looked handsome in his tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. But Elena found herself studying his face for signs of deception. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Victor began, cutting into his filet mignon. I realize I may have been too harsh. Pregnancy is stressful, and I want to support you through this. Elena wanted to believe him. She wanted to sink into the comfort of his apology and pretend the messages had been a misunderstanding. But something in his eyes, a coldness she had never noticed before, kept her guard up. Victor, I need you to be honest with me. Are you having an affair? Elena, sweetheart, you're my wife. You're carrying our child. How could you even think such a thing? Before Elena could respond. Victor's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face changed subtly. I'm sorry. I have to take this. It's about the Henderson deal. But Elena could see the caller ID clearly from across the table. Sophia. Victor answered with a casual, hello. But Elena caught the softness in his tone, the gentle way he spoke that he hadn't used with her in months. Yes, I understand, he said, walking toward the restaurant's entrance. We'll discuss the details tomorrow. When he returned, his demeanor had shifted. There was an energy about him, an excitement that Elena recognized but hadn't seen directed at her in a very long time. Sorry about that. Where were we? We were talking about honesty, Elena said quietly. The rest of the dinner passed in strained conversation. Victor seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly and offering explanations that felt rehearsed. Elena picked at her salmon, her appetite destroyed by the growing certainty that her marriage was built on lies. As they prepared to leave, Elena excused herself to the restroom. Walking past the bar area, she overheard Victor on another phone call. It won't be much longer, he was saying in a low voice. We just need to remove the obstacle, and then we can move forward with our plans. Remove the obstacle? Elena's blood ran cold. Was she the obstacle? And what exactly did Victor mean by removing her? She returned to the table on shaking legs, her mind racing with possibilities she didn't want to consider. A husband who wanted to be with his mistress badly enough to fake a pregnancy emergency, a millionaire who saw his pregnant wife as an obstacle to be removed. The drive home was silent except for the rain that had started falling again, creating a rhythm against the windshield that matched Elena's racing heartbeat. Victor seemed lost in thought, his jaw set in a way that made Elena nervous. Are you planning something? Victor, she asked as they pulled into their driveway. Planning something like what? I heard you on the phone. You mentioned removing an obstacle. Victor's laugh was cold, artificial. Elena, you're being paranoid again. I was talking about a business deal. You really need to get control of these emotions before they affect the baby. That night, Elena lay awake listening to Victor's steady breathing beside her. 20 years of marriage, and she felt like she was sleeping next to a stranger. A dangerous stranger who spoke about removing obstacles and received loving text messages from women named Sophia. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. Whatever Victor was planning, she had to protect her child. But how could a 45-year-old pregnant wife betrayed by her husband fight back against a millionaire who seemed to have already planned her downfall? The answer would come sooner than she expected, and it would test every ounce of strength she had. Elena's first therapy session took place in a cozy office downtown, recommended by Marie, who insisted that professional support was essential during this midlife betrayal story. Dr. Sarah Chen specialized in women's life transitions, particularly those facing relationship trauma during midlife crisis periods. Many women in your situation feel isolated and doubt their own perceptions, Dr. Chen explained during their initial consultation. The fact that you're seeking help shows incredible strength. The therapy group met every Wednesday evening in a circle of comfortable chairs. 5 women, all between 40 and 55, all dealing with various forms of life upheaval. Elena listened as Sarah, a 48-year-old teacher, shared her story of discovering her husband's secret gambling addiction. I kept thinking about that scene in The Good Wife, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. When Alicia discovers Peter's corruption and realizes she has to rebuild her entire life, that's exactly how I felt. Elena nodded, understanding completely. I feel like I'm watching my life from the outside, like it's happening to someone else. This heartbreaking family drama playing out, and I'm just a spectator. The group offered strategies for emotional survival, practical advice about documentation, and most importantly, validation that Elena's feelings were normal and justified. As she drove home that first evening, Elena felt a small spark of hope that she could navigate this crisis. But hope, she was learning, could be dangerous. The next few weeks brought a careful dance of normalcy. Victor continued his routine of early morning workouts, long days at the office, and late evening business calls. Elena documented everything, following the group's advice to keep detailed records of his behavior and suspicious activities. It was during this period of hypervigilance that Elena discovered the financial discrepancies. While organizing bills for their accountant, she noticed several large withdrawals from their joint savings account. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, always with vague notations like business investment or equipment purchase. When Elena cross-referenced these withdrawals with Victor's business expenses, none of them matched legitimate company expenditures. Her pregnancy app reminded her daily that she was now 26 weeks along, well into her second trimester. The baby's movements were becoming stronger, more frequent, as if responding to Elena's elevated stress levels. She found herself talking to the baby during these quiet moments of discovery. "Daddy's hiding something from us," she whispered, one hand on her belly while the other scrolled through bank statements on her laptop. "But Mommy's going to figure it out." The apartment gift arrived on a Thursday morning while Victor was at his weekly golf game. Elena signed for the elegant package, assuming it was something Victor had ordered for the nursery they were slowly preparing. Inside was a beautiful crystal vase with an unsigned card that simply read, "For the woman who deserves everything." Elena's hands shook as she examined the vase. The style was expensive, sophisticated, not something Victor would typically choose. When she Googled the manufacturer, she discovered it was a limited edition piece that retailed for over $800. The implication was clear. Someone was sending gifts to their home. Someone who knew Elena would be the one to receive them. Someone who wanted to send a message. That evening, Elena confronted Victor about the mysterious gift. "Did you order this vase?" she asked, setting it on their dining room table. Victor's reaction was immediate and telling. His face flushed, his jaw tightened, and for just a moment, Elena saw something that looked like panic in his eyes. "I've never seen it before," he said quickly. "Maybe it was delivered to the wrong address." The card was addressed to the woman who deserves everything. That's oddly specific for a delivery mistake. "Elena, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe one of your book club friends sent it as a pregnancy gift." But Elena knew better. This gift was from Sophia, a calculated move in a game Elena was only beginning to understand. The husband affair with Mistress was escalating beyond secret messages and hidden phone calls. Sophia was marking her territory, letting Elena know that she was watching, waiting. The romantic getaway suggestion came the following weekend. Victor approached Elena with unusual enthusiasm, suggesting they take a long weekend trip to their cabin in Wisconsin. "We haven't been there since last summer," he said, his arm around her shoulders as they sat on their living room couch. "It would be good for us to reconnect before the baby comes." Elena wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, but the timing felt suspicious. Why now, when their relationship was at its most strained? Why the sudden desire for romantic isolation just weeks after she had discovered his affair? "I'm not sure traveling is wise at 27 weeks, Elena said cautiously. "Dr. Martinez said I should avoid long car trips." "It's only 3 hours, Victor insisted. "We'll take frequent breaks. The fresh air will be good for you and the baby." Against her better judgment, Elena agreed. Maybe Marie was right. Maybe she was becoming too suspicious, too paranoid. Maybe this was Victor's genuine attempt to save their marriage. The drive to the cabin took place on a Friday evening in late October. The fall colors were spectacular, the leaves creating a canopy of gold and crimson above the winding country roads. Victor seemed relaxed, even happy, singing along to classic rock songs on the radio and making jokes about their early dating days. "Remember the first time I brought you here?" he asked as they passed the familiar landmarks. "You were so worried about bears." Elena smiled despite herself. "I had grown up in the city. The idea of sleeping in the woods terrified me. And now look at you, brave enough to face anything." The comment struck Elena as odd, almost prophetic, but she pushed the feeling aside. Maybe this weekend would be the turning point they needed. The cabin sat on 50 acres of wooded property, completely isolated from neighbors or main roads. Victor had inherited it from his father and spent considerable money over the years updating the kitchen, adding modern amenities, and improving the generator system. It was beautiful and peaceful, but also incredibly remote. That first evening passed pleasantly enough. They grilled steaks on the deck, shared a bottle of sparkling cider while watching the sunset, and talked about baby names and nursery themes. Elena felt some of her tension melting away, allowing herself to hope that the pregnant wife betrayed narrative was all in her imagination. But the next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Elena woke early, around 6 a.m., and padded to the kitchen to make coffee. Victor was still sleeping, or so she thought, until she heard his voice coming from the screen porch. He was speaking quietly, but in the still morning air, his words carried clearly. "Everything's set for tomorrow," he was saying. "The timing will look natural. Accidents happen on these mountain roads all the time." Elena's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the kitchen wall, straining to hear more. "I know it seems extreme, but there's no other way. She's becoming too suspicious, asking too many questions. And with the baby coming, she'll never agree to a divorce. This way, we get everything we want, and everyone thinks it's a tragedy." The conversation continued for several more minutes, but Elena couldn't process the specific words. Her mind was reeling with the horrifying reality of what she was hearing. Victor wasn't just having an affair. He was planning to kill her, remove the obstacle. The phrase from the restaurant made sickening sense now. Elena crept back to the bedroom, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Victor would hear it. She needed to think, to plan, to figure out how to survive what was coming. But first, she needed to act normal, to give no indication that she had overheard his conversation. When Victor came back inside 20 minutes later, Elena was sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee, reading a pregnancy magazine as if nothing had happened. "Morning. Beautiful," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Sleep well." "Like a baby," Elena replied, proud that her voice sounded steady. "What should we do today?" "I thought we'd take a drive up to Eagle's Peak. The view is incredible this time of year, and it's a nice, easy hike for someone in your condition." Eagle's Peak. Elena knew the area well. The road was narrow, winding, with a steep drop-off on one side and no guardrails in several sections. If someone wanted to stage a car accident, it would be the perfect location. "That sounds lovely," Elena said, placing her hand protectively over her belly. "Should we pack a lunch?" "Already taken care of." Victor smiled, and Elena noticed he was being unusually attentive, almost solicitous. "I want this to be a special day for us." "Special?" Elena suppressed a shudder. This was supposed to be her last day alive, and Victor was treating it like a romantic adventure. As they prepared for the drive, Elena's mind raced through possibilities. Could she refuse to go? Make up an excuse about feeling sick? But that might make Victor suspicious, might cause him to change his plans in ways that would be even more dangerous. Could she somehow signal for help, leave a message for someone? But there was no cell phone coverage at the cabin, and their nearest neighbor was miles away. The only option seemed to be to go along with Victor's plan and hope for an opportunity to survive what was coming. They left the cabin around noon, Elena's legs shaking as she climbed into the passenger seat of Victor's SUV. The vehicle was larger and heavier than his usual Mercedes, chosen specifically for this deadly purpose. She realized. The drive to Eagle's Peak took about 45 minutes on narrow, twisting roads. Elena found herself memorizing every turn, every landmark, every possible escape route. Victor chatted casually about their upcoming nursery renovations and his plans for expanding the business, as if he weren't planning to murder his pregnant wife in the next few hours. "You know, Elena," he said as they climbed higher into the mountains, "I want you to know how much these 20 years have meant to me. Whatever happens, I want you to remember that I did love you." Elena's throat tightened. Was this his idea of a final goodbye? His way of easing his conscience before committing murder? "I love you too, Victor," she replied, because what else could she say? They reached the scenic overlook as storm clouds began gathering on the horizon. The view was indeed spectacular, with rolling hills stretching to the horizon and fall colors creating a tapestry of natural beauty. Under different circumstances, Elena would have found it breathtaking. "Let's walk to the edge," Victor suggested. "I want to take a photo of you with the mountains in the background." Elena's survival instincts screamed at her to refuse, but she forced herself to smile and follow Victor toward the cliff's edge. As they walked, she noticed his positioning, the way he stayed slightly behind her, the tension in his shoulders that suggested he was preparing for something. "Right here," he said, indicating a spot about 6 feet from the drop-off. "The lighting is perfect." Elena positioned herself as directed, but kept her weight centered, her muscles ready to react. Victor raised his phone as if to take a photo, then lowered it. "Actually, let's get a selfie together," he said, moving to stand beside her. "For the baby book." This was it. Elena could feel the moment approaching like a thunderstorm, the air electric with danger. Victor's arm went around her waist, pulling her closer to the edge than was safe or comfortable. "Smile," he said. But instead of taking a photo, Victor's grip on her waist tightened, and Elena felt him beginning to shift their weight toward the cliff. In that split second, she made a choice that would save her life. Elena threw her entire body weight backward, away from the edge, causing Victor to lose his balance. As he stumbled forward, trying to regain his footing, Elena ran. She ran with the desperate energy of a woman fighting for 2 lives. Her hand pressed protectively over her belly as her feet pounded on the rocky path. Behind her, she could hear Victor cursing, his footsteps gaining ground as her pregnancy-hampered body struggled to maintain speed. The storm hit just as Elena reached the car, sheets of rain turning the parking area into a slippery, treacherous surface. She yanked open the driver's side door, grateful that Victor had left the keys in the ignition, and started the engine just as he rounded the bend. "Elena, stop!" he shouted over the thunder. "You're being irrational. Come back." But Elena had heard enough lies. She threw the SUV into reverse, backing out of the parking space just as Victor reached for the door handle. The look on his face as she drove away was one of pure rage. The mask of loving husband finally completely dropped. The drive down the mountain was harrowing. The rain made the roads slick and dangerous, and Elena's hands shook so badly she could barely maintain control of the vehicle. Every turn felt like a potential disaster. Every shadow looked like Victor following in another car. Halfway down the mountain, Elena's worst fears materialized. In her rearview mirror, she could see headlights gaining on her. Victor had somehow gotten another vehicle, possibly flagged down a passing motorist with some story about his pregnant wife stealing his car. The cat-and-mouse chase that followed pushed Elena to the limits of her driving ability. The rain made visibility nearly impossible, and her pregnancy made it difficult to maneuver quickly. As they approached the section of road she knew would be Victor's chosen spot for the accident, Elena made a desperate decision. Instead of continuing down the main road where Victor expected her to go, Elena yanked the wheel to the right, taking a smaller access road that led to an abandoned mining operation. The road was rougher, more dangerous, but it was unexpected. Victor's headlights followed for several minutes before Elena realized she was in serious trouble. This road dead-ended at the old mine site. She was trapped, with nowhere to run, and a husband who had already proven he was willing to kill her. The SUV skidded to a stop in the muddy parking area of the abandoned mine. Elena looked around desperately for options. There was an old maintenance building, some heavy equipment, and what looked like a mining office that might have a working phone. As Victor's headlights appeared in her rearview mirror, Elena made her final gambit. She drove the SUV directly toward the steepest part of the access road, where it curved sharply downhill toward a rocky creek bed. At the last possible moment, she opened the driver's side door and rolled out, tumbling into the brush as the vehicle continued its momentum down the slope. The crash was spectacular. The SUV rolled 3 times before coming to rest upside down in the creek, steam rising from the engine as rain continued to pour down. From her hiding spot in the undergrowth, Elena watched Victor's headlights sweep the scene, searching for signs of life. She held her breath, fighting the urge to cry out as rocks and branches scratched her face and arms. Her baby kicked frantically, as if sensing the danger they were in. Elena pressed both hands to her belly, whispering silent promises that they would survive this together. Victor spent nearly an hour at the crash site, eventually making what Elena assumed were phone calls to report the accident. When rescue vehicles finally arrived, Elena was forced to listen as her husband played the role of devastated spouse, describing how his pregnant wife had panicked during the storm and driven off the road. "She was acting strangely all weekend," Elena heard him tell the search team. "I think the pregnancy hormones were affecting her judgment. I should have driven." The search continued through the night, but Elena remained hidden, knowing that revealing herself would only give Victor another opportunity to finish what he had started. When dawn broke and the rescue teams finally left, Elena was presumed dead, her body lost in the rushing creek water as she lay shivering in the underbrush, her clothes soaked through and her body aching from the fall. Elena felt a strange sense of clarity. She was legally dead now, which meant she was also free. Free from Victor's control, free from his lies, free to discover the full extent of his betrayal. But first, she had to survive. And with her baby's life depending on her choices, Elena Thompson was about to discover just how strong a pregnant wife betrayed could become. Elena's first night dead was spent in an abandoned hunting cabin she discovered 2 miles from the crash site. The structure was weathered and basic, but it offered shelter from the rain and a place to assess her situation. As she sat on the dusty floor, back against a wall, Elena felt the baby moving restlessly, as if sensing their precarious circumstances. "We're alive," she whispered to her belly, her voice hoarse from the cold night air. "That's what matters right now." we're alive, and he thinks we're not. The next morning brought the challenge of immediate survival. Elena's wallet and phone had been in her purse, which was now somewhere at the bottom of the creek with the SUV. She had no identification, no money, and no way to contact anyone without revealing that she had survived Victor's murder attempt. More critically, she needed medical attention. The fall and night in the wilderness had left her bruised and dehydrated, and she was terrified about potential complications to her pregnancy. But how could a legally dead woman seek medical care? The solution came from an unexpected source. As Elena explored the area around the hunting cabin, looking for supplies or any sign of recent human presence, she encountered Thomas Murphy, a 78-year-old retired park ranger who had been living off-grid in the wilderness for the past 5 years. "Well, I'll be damned," Thomas said when he found Elena collapsed near his vegetable garden. "You're that woman from the news, the one who went off Eagle's Peak." Elena's panic was immediate. If Thomas knew who she was, her cover was blown. But the old man's next words surprised her. "Except you're clearly not dead, which means someone wants people to think you are. In my experience, that usually means you're running from something dangerous." Thomas Murphy became Elena's unlikely savior. As a former park ranger, he had basic medical training and was able to assess that both Elena and the baby appeared to be in stable condition despite their ordeal. His off-grid cabin was equipped with a ham radio, solar panels, and enough supplies to support them both temporarily. "I've been living up here since my wife passed," Thomas explained as he prepared a simple meal of canned soup and bread. "City life lost its appeal after that, but I keep up with the news, and I've got a pretty good sense for when someone's in real trouble." Elena found herself telling Thomas the entire story, from discovering Victor's affair to overhearing his murder plot. The old man listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "So you've got yourself a classic case of a wealthy man who wants to start fresh with a younger woman," Thomas summarized. "And you're the inconvenient obstacle that needs to be removed." "That's exactly what he called me. An obstacle. Well, being legally dead gives you some advantages," Thomas said thoughtfully. "You can observe, investigate, and plan without him knowing you're alive. But it also means you can't access your normal support systems." Over the following days, Thomas helped Elena establish a temporary identity and survival plan. His ham radio connected them to a network of off-grid enthusiasts and survivalists who were surprisingly willing to help a woman escaping domestic violence without asking too many questions. Through this network, Elena obtained basic supplies, prenatal vitamins, and access to a retired midwife named Margaret, who lived 40 miles away and was experienced in helping women who needed to stay invisible for various reasons. "I've delivered babies for women hiding from abusive husbands, women in witness protection, and women who just needed to disappear for a while." Margaret explained during her first visit to Thomas's cabin. "Your baby's heartbeat is strong, and everything appears normal despite your recent trauma." Elena's relief was overwhelming. "I was so afraid the stress might have hurt the baby." "Babies are remarkably resilient," Margaret assured her. "But you need to take care of yourself too. This level of stress isn't sustainable long-term." As Elena settled into her temporary new reality, she began using Thomas's ham radio and borrowed laptop to research Victor's activities following her supposed death. What she discovered was both infuriating and enlightening. Victor had played the role of grieving widower perfectly. News coverage showed him at Elena's memorial service, looking appropriately devastated as he spoke about their 20 years of marriage and the tragic loss of their unborn child. The entire Chicago business community had rallied around him, offering support and sympathy for his terrible loss. But the most revealing discovery came when Elena found Victor's social media accounts. Just 3 days after her memorial service, he had posted a photo of himself with Sophia at an expensive restaurant, with the caption, "Learning to live again with the support of good friends." "Good friends," Elena muttered, screenshot the image. He couldn't even wait a week to go public with his mistress. More disturbing was what Elena discovered about Sofia Martinez. The 32-year-old marketing consultant had a history of relationships with married men. a pattern of targeting wealthy older men going through midlife crises. Through careful internet stalking, Elena learned that Sophia had been married twice before, both times to men significantly older and wealthier than herself. But the most shocking revelation came when Elena dug deeper into Sophia's background. Hidden in old social media posts and archived news articles, she discovered that Sophia had a 7-year-old daughter named Isabella, a daughter who, based on the timeline and certain physical features visible in photos, appeared to be Victor's child. "He's been lying about everything," Elena told Thomas as she processed this information. "Not only is he having an affair, but he's been hiding a child for years. A child he's never mentioned to me, never acknowledged, never supported." "That puts a different spin on things," Thomas agreed. "If he's been keeping this secret for 7 years, it means his affair with Sophia goes back to early in her marriage." Elena felt nauseous, and not from morning sickness. The scope of Victor's betrayal was so much larger than she had imagined. He hadn't just fallen for another woman. He had been living a double life for nearly a decade. But this revelation also gave Elena something she desperately needed: leverage. As her pregnancy progressed to 30 weeks, Elena began formulating a plan for her return to the world of the living. She couldn't remain hidden forever, both for her own safety and for her baby's future. But when she revealed herself, she needed to be in a position of strength. With Thomas's help, Elena began documenting everything she could discover about Victor's business dealings, his relationship with Sophia, and the financial discrepancies she had noticed before her supposed death. The ham radio network proved invaluable for this research, connecting her with former employees of Victor's company who were willing to share information about questionable business practices. "I always wondered about those offshore accounts," confided Janet Morrison, a former Thompson Industries accountant who had been laid off 6 months earlier. Mr. Thompson was very secretive about certain transactions, always handling them personally rather than going through normal channels. Elena's investigation revealed a pattern of financial manipulation that went far beyond hiding money to support a mistress. Victor had been systematically moving company funds to overseas accounts, preparing for what appeared to be either a major business transition or an exit strategy. "He's planning to run," Elena realized during one of her evening conversations with Thomas, "probably to some country without extradition treaties. Start fresh with Sophia and their daughter, leaving everyone else to deal with the financial mess, including any legitimate creditors and employees who depend on the company," Thomas pointed out. "This goes way beyond personal betrayal. He's planning to destroy a lot of lives." Elena's growing anger was tempered by a practical concern. At 32 weeks pregnant, she was approaching the point where she would need proper medical facilities for delivery. Margaret could handle a normal birth, but if there were complications, both Elena and the baby could be at risk. More importantly, Elena realized that her child deserved better than a life in hiding. Her son or daughter should have access to education, healthcare, legal identity, and all the opportunities that came with being a legitimate citizen. "I need to come back from the dead," Elena told Thomas one evening as they watched the sunset from his cabin's front porch. "But I need to do it strategically, with enough evidence to protect myself and the baby." "What did you have in mind?" Elena had been thinking about this for weeks, inspired partly by Margaret's stories of other women who had successfully escaped dangerous situations, and partly by her therapy group's discussions of female empowerment. "I'm going to give Victor exactly what he thinks he wants," she said. "I'm going to let him marry Sophia, let him think he's won, and then I'm going to destroy him." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "That's a dangerous game." "He tried to kill me. Thomas, kill me and my baby. He doesn't get to walk away from that and live happily ever after with his mistress." Elena's plan was complex but elegant in its simplicity. She would remain hidden until after Victor remarried, using that time to gather irrefutable evidence of his fraud, attempted murder, and financial crimes. Then she would reveal herself in a way that would not only expose his crimes, but also ensure that she and her child were protected from any retaliation. But first, she needed to establish her own security and support network. Margaret had connections to lawyers who specialized in domestic violence cases, financial crimes, and family law. Thomas knew people who could provide safe housing and identity protection, and Elena's own savings, if she could access them safely, would provide the financial resources needed for her plan. The first test of Elena's strategy came sooner than expected. Through her online monitoring, she learned that Victor was planning to propose to Sophia on Thanksgiving, just 6 weeks after Elena's supposed death. "The man has no shame," Margaret commented when Elena shared this news. "Proposing to his mistress before his wife's body is even recovered." "Actually, this works perfectly for my plan," Elena replied, her hand resting on her now prominent belly. "Let him commit to Sophia publicly. Let him think he's free to start his new life. It just gives me more ammunition for when I make my comeback." As Elena prepared to enter the final weeks of her pregnancy in hiding, she reflected on how much she had changed since that day in Dr. Martinez's office when she first discovered Victor's betrayal. The frightened, dependent housewife was gone, replaced by a woman who had learned to survive in the wilderness, investigate financial crimes, and plan a complex strategy for justice. "Your daddy thinks he killed us," she whispered to her baby during one of their quiet evening conversations. "But what he actually did was set us free. And when we're ready, we're going to show him just how wrong he was about your mama." The baby kicked in response, a strong, healthy movement that filled Elena with determination. Whatever happened next, she and her child would face it together, armed with truth, evidence, and the kind of strength that only came from surviving the unthinkable. But Elena's plan would soon face its first major test, as complications in her pregnancy forced her to make choices she never anticipated. Elena's labor began at 34 weeks, 6 weeks earlier than expected, and under circumstances that would challenge every survival skill she had learned in the wilderness. The contractions started just before dawn on a frigid November morning, pulling her from restless sleep with an intensity that left no doubt about what was happening. "Thomas," she called, her voice tight with pain. "I think it's time." The old park ranger was at her side within minutes, his years of wilderness medical training kicking in automatically. "How far apart are the contractions?" "About 5 minutes," Elena gasped, gripping the edge of the cot where she had been sleeping for the past month. "This is too early. The baby isn't supposed to come for another 6 weeks." Thomas was already reaching for the ham radio, calling for Margaret. But the weather had turned severe overnight, with ice storms making travel nearly impossible. Even if Margaret could attempt the journey, it would take her hours to reach the cabin. "We may need to handle this ourselves," Thomas said gently. "I've delivered 3 babies in my ranger days, and I've got supplies. The question is whether we try to get you to a hospital." Elena shook her head immediately. "I can't go to a hospital. Not yet. If Victor finds out I'm alive." The unspoken fear hung in the air between them. Elena was 34 weeks pregnant, legally dead, and in labor in an off-grid cabin with only a retired park ranger for medical support. Under normal circumstances, it would be considered madness, but these weren't normal circumstances. "Then we do this here," Thomas said with quiet determination. "I'll talk you through it, and we'll manage whatever comes." The next 12 hours were the longest of Elena's life. Labor progressed slowly but steadily, complicated by the stress of her situation and the primitive conditions. Thomas proved to be a remarkably calm and competent birth assistant, using his radio to consult with Margaret when the weather allowed for communication. "The baby's heart rate is strong." Margaret's voice crackled through the radio static during one of Elena's brief rest periods between contractions. "That's the most important thing. Keep Elena hydrated, keep her calm, and trust the process." As the sun set and Elena's contractions intensified, she found herself thinking about all the birth plans she had made with Victor. They had toured the birthing center at Chicago General, selected a pediatrician, prepared a hospital bag with tiny newborn clothes. In her wildest nightmares, she had never imagined giving birth alone in a wilderness cabin while hiding from her murderous husband. "I want to name him David," Elena said during a particularly difficult contraction, gripping Thomas's weathered hand. David means beloved in Hebrew, and if he's anything like his mama, he's going to be a fighter. How do you know it's a boy? Thomas asked, trying to distract her from the pain. Mother's intuition, Elena smiled weakly. Or maybe just wishful thinking. A boy might be safer from Victor's manipulations. As midnight approached, Elena's strength began to flag. The physical demands of labor, combined with weeks of stress and inadequate nutrition, were taking their toll. But just when she thought she couldn't continue, the urge to push became overwhelming. "This is it," Thomas announced, positioning himself with the supplies they had prepared. "I can see the head. One more big push." Elena. David Thomas Thompson entered the world at 12:47 a.m. on November 15th, screaming lustily despite his early arrival. Elena's first glimpse of her son's red, wrinkled face filled her with a love so intense it was almost painful. "He's beautiful," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as Thomas placed the baby on her chest. "He's perfect." But the joy of birth was quickly overshadowed by concerning signs. David's breathing seemed labored, and his color wasn't quite right. Thomas examined the baby with growing concern. "His breathing is a little fast," he said carefully. "That's not uncommon for premature babies, but it's something we need to monitor closely." Elena's new mother euphoria evaporated, replaced by primal fear. "What does that mean? Is he going to be okay?" "I don't know," Thomas admitted. "Margaret would know better. But with this weather..." The next 24 hours were agonizing. David's breathing difficulties persisted, and he had trouble maintaining his body temperature despite their best efforts to keep him warm. Elena held him constantly, skin-to-skin contact being one of the few things they could do to help stabilize his condition. "He needs a hospital," Elena said finally, her voice breaking. "I can't let him suffer because I'm afraid of Victor." Thomas nodded grimly. "I agree, but if we take him to a hospital, your secret is out. There's no way to explain a premature baby without revealing who you are." Elena stared down at her tiny son, his chest rising and falling too rapidly, his skin taking on a bluish tinge that terrified her. In that moment, she realized that her elaborate plans for revenge meant nothing if her child didn't survive. "Call for medical evacuation," she said. "I don't care about the consequences anymore. I won't let my baby die to protect my secret." But before Thomas could reach for the radio, Margaret's voice came through the static. "Thomas, are you there? I've been monitoring emergency frequencies. There's a medical helicopter grounded about 20 miles from your location due to weather. If you can get Elena and the baby to Highway 47, they might be able to pick them up." The journey to Highway 47 was harrowing. Thomas loaded Elena and David into his ancient pickup truck, using every blanket and heating source available to keep the baby warm. Elena sat in the passenger seat. David pressed against her chest, whispering prayers and promises to whatever higher power might be listening. "If you let him live," she whispered, "I'll be the best mother I can be. I'll protect him from Victor. I'll give him a good life. I'll do whatever it takes." The helicopter was waiting when they reached the highway, its rotors spinning in the frigid air. The paramedics took one look at David and confirmed Elena's worst fears. "Respiratory distress syndrome," the lead paramedic explained as they loaded Elena and the baby into the aircraft. "Common in premature babies. The lungs aren't fully developed yet. We need to get him to a NICU immediately." As the helicopter lifted off, Elena watched Thomas's truck disappear below them. The old man had become her lifeline during the most difficult period of her life, and now she was leaving him behind, possibly forever. "Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions for our records," the paramedic said, pulling out a clipboard. "What's your name?" Elena's mind raced. She could continue the charade, make up a false identity, and try to maintain her anonymity. But looking down at David's struggling form, she realized that her child's life was more important than her plans for revenge. "Elena Thompson," she said clearly. "My name is Elena Thompson." The paramedic's expression shifted immediately. "Elena Thompson, the woman who died in the car accident last month." "I didn't die," Elena said simply. My husband tried to kill me, but I survived, and now I need to save my son. The news of Elena's survival spread through the hospital within hours of their arrival. David was immediately admitted to the neonatal intensive care unit, where a team of specialists worked to stabilize his breathing and monitor his development. Elena found herself in the surreal position of being treated like a celebrity, a woman back from the dead with a story that captured the imagination of everyone who heard it. But the media attention brought its own complications. Within 6 hours of Elena's arrival at the hospital, news vans were camped outside. Reporters were calling every number they could find connected to the Thompson family, and Elena's supposedly grief-stricken husband was being asked to comment on his wife's miraculous return from the dead. Victor's first statement to the press was masterful in its calculation. "I'm overjoyed that Elena is alive," he said, standing outside Thompson Industries headquarters with what appeared to be tears in his eyes. "I've been devastated by grief for the past month, and this news is nothing short of miraculous. I can't wait to be reunited with my wife and meet our child." Elena watched the news coverage from her hospital room, David sleeping peacefully in her arms after a successful night in the NICU. The doctors were optimistic about his recovery, but he would need to remain hospitalized for several weeks as his lungs continued to develop. "He's good," she told Margaret, who had driven through the night to reach the hospital. "Victor's very good at playing the loving husband when it serves his purposes." "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked. "He'll be here soon, probably with lawyers and media in tow." Elena looked down at her son, this tiny miracle who had already survived so much in his brief life. Her plans for elaborate revenge seemed less important now than simply ensuring that David grew up safe and loved. "I'm going to tell the truth," she said finally. "All of it. The affair, the murder attempt, the financial fraud. I'm going to make sure Victor never has the opportunity to hurt me or David again." But Elena's determination to expose Victor would be tested when he arrived at the hospital later that afternoon, accompanied by the best lawyers money could buy, and a story that cast serious doubt on Elena's version of events. The battle for truth, for David's future, and for Elena's very survival was about to begin in earnest. Victor's arrival at the hospital was orchestrated like a political campaign event. He swept through the doors flanked by 2 expensive lawyers, a crisis management consultant, and enough media presence to ensure maximum visibility for his performance as the relieved husband. Elena watched from her window as Victor addressed the gathered reporters in the hospital parking lot, his voice carrying just the right note of concern mixed with joy. "My wife has been through a terrible ordeal," he said, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. "The trauma of the accident has clearly affected her memory and judgment. What matters now is getting her the help she needs and ensuring our son receives the best possible medical care." The implication was clear and calculated. Victor was already establishing the narrative that Elena was mentally unstable, unreliable, possibly suffering from postpartum psychosis or trauma-induced delusions. By the time he finished his press conference, public opinion was already shifting in his favor. Elena's first face-to-face encounter with her husband since he tried to murder her took place in the hospital's family conference room, with both sets of lawyers present and a court-appointed advocate observing. Victor's transformation was remarkable. Gone was the cold, calculating man who had plotted her death. In his place sat a concerned husband, perfectly groomed and appropriately emotional. "Elena, sweetheart," he said, reaching across the table as if to take her hand. "Thank God you're alive. I've been going crazy with worry." Elena pulled her hands back, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Save the performance, Victor. We both know what really happened at Eagle's Peak." "I know you believe that," Victor replied, his tone gentle and patient. "But the doctors have explained that trauma can cause false memories, paranoid thoughts. The important thing is that you're safe now, and we can get you the help you need." Elena's lawyer, Rebecca Chen, a family law specialist recommended by Margaret's network, leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, my client is prepared to provide detailed testimony about your affair with Sophia Martinez and your attempt on her life. We also have evidence of financial irregularities in your business dealings." Victor's lead attorney, Jonathan Wells, smiled condescendingly. Ms. Chen, I'm sure you'll understand that accusations made by someone who has spent the last month living in the wilderness while suffering from pregnancy-related mental health issues need to be taken with considerable skepticism. My client's mental health is perfectly stable, Rebecca shot back. She has undergone psychiatric evaluation, and there are no signs of delusion or psychosis. Then how do you explain her bizarre behavior? Wells countered, fleeing from her loving husband, living off-grid with strangers, giving birth in primitive conditions when excellent medical care was available. These are not the actions of a rational person. Elena felt the familiar frustration of being talked about as if she weren't in the room, her autonomy dismissed and her experiences invalidated. But this time, she had evidence to support her claims. I have photos of the text messages between Victor and Sophia, Elena said, producing printed screenshots from her research. I have financial records showing unexplained transfers. I have witness testimony from the park where Victor tried to push me off a cliff. Victor examined the photos with what appeared to be genuine confusion. Elena, these messages are from my business relationship with Sophia. She's a marketing consultant for Thompson Industries. And as for the financial transfers, those are legitimate business expenses that I'd be happy to explain to any accountant. Elena stared at her husband in amazement. He was so smooth, so convincing, that for a moment she almost doubted her own memories. But then she thought about David, fighting for his life in the NICU because of the stress Victor had put them through. What about Isabella? Elena asked quietly. For the first time, Victor's composure slipped slightly. Who, Sophia's daughter, your daughter, Isabella Martinez, age 7, who looks exactly like you did at that age according to your childhood photos. But the silence in the room was deafening. Victor's lawyers exchanged glances, and Elena could see Wells mentally recalculating his strategy. I don't know what you're implying, Victor said carefully. I'm not implying anything, Elena replied. I'm stating facts. You've been having an affair with Sophia Martinez for at least 8 years. You have a child together that you've hidden from me throughout our marriage. And when I discovered your secret, you decided it would be easier to kill me than divorce me. Wells cleared his throat. Even if we assume, for argument's sake, that my client had a brief indiscretion several years ago, that doesn't support the outlandish claim that he attempted murder. Car accidents happen, Mrs. Thompson. Mountain roads are dangerous, especially in bad weather. Then explain why Victor told someone on the phone that he needed to remove the obstacle, Elena challenged. Explain why he suggested the drive to Eagles Peak. Explain why he positioned me at the edge of a cliff and tried to push me off. I explain it as the false memories of a traumatized woman who nearly died in a car accident, Wells replied smoothly. Memories that have been distorted by months of isolation and stress. Elena felt the walls closing in around her. Victor and his legal team had clearly anticipated her accusations and prepared responses that made her sound like an unstable woman, suffering from paranoid delusions. Without additional evidence, it would be her word against his, and Victor had the advantage of money, influence, and public sympathy. But Rebecca Chen had been preparing for this battle as well. Your Honor, she addressed the court-appointed advocate, we'd like to request DNA testing to establish paternity of Isabella Martinez, full financial disclosure of Thompson Industries accounts, and a psychiatric evaluation of Mr. Thompson to assess his truthfulness and mental state. Objection, Wells interjected. These requests are fishing expeditions designed to embarrass my client. There's no legal basis for ordering DNA tests on children not involved in this custody case. There is if those children establish a pattern of deception and financial obligation that affects my client's child, Rebecca countered. If Mr. Thompson has been supporting another family for 8 years without disclosure, that's relevant to both the custody case and the potential criminal charges. Elena watched the advocate make notes, weighing the competing arguments. David's future hung in the balance of this legal chess match, and Elena felt helpless to control the outcome. The advocate's decision was a mixed ruling that satisfied no one completely. Given the extraordinary circumstances of this case, he announced, I'm ordering supervised visitation for Mr. Thompson pending full investigation of Mrs. Thompson's allegations. I'm also ordering psychiatric evaluations for both parents, financial disclosure from Thompson Industries, and DNA testing if Ms. Martinez voluntarily consents. Elena felt a surge of hope. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was enough to prevent Victor from gaining full custody while the investigation proceeded. But Victor's response reminded her that this was far from over. I'm disappointed that my wife's trauma has led to these accusations, he told the media after the hearing. But I'm confident that a full investigation will prove my innocence and allow us to reunite as a family. In the meantime, I just want to focus on my son's health and my wife's recovery. Elena returned to the hospital to find David doing better. His breathing stabilized and his color improved. As she held her son, she realized that the legal battle was just beginning. Victor had resources, connections, and a decades-long reputation in the Chicago business community. Elena had truth, but in a legal system where perception often mattered more than reality, she would need much more than truth to protect her child. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Rebecca Chen called Elena with barely contained excitement. Sofia Martinez was arrested this morning, she announced. Apparently, someone tipped off the IRS about unreported income from Thompson Industries. When they searched her apartment, they found over $200,000 in cash and documents that appear to show systematic money laundering. Elena felt a surge of hope. Does this help our case? It helps establish that Victor was indeed funneling money to her, which supports your allegations about their relationship. But there's more. Sophia is talking to investigators, apparently trying to cut a deal for herself. What kind of deal? The kind where she provides evidence against Victor in exchange for reduced charges. Rebecca explained. Elena, I think your husband's perfect facade is about to crumble. But even as Elena celebrated this development, she knew that Victor wouldn't go down without a fight. A man who was willing to commit murder to protect his secrets wouldn't hesitate to use every resource at his disposal to destroy her credibility and maintain custody of their son. The real battle was just beginning. Elena's brief moment of hope was shattered when she woke up to find her photo on the front page of every major Chicago newspaper. But these weren't sympathetic portrayals of a woman who had survived attempted murder. Instead, the headlines painted her as an unstable wife whose paranoid delusions had torn apart a loving family. Delusional or desperate wife's wild claims against grieving husband. From dead to drama queen, the Elena Thompson story, midlife crisis or mental breakdown. You decide. The stories, clearly fed by Victor's crisis management team, portrayed Elena as a woman whose pregnancy and midlife insecurities had driven her to elaborate fantasies about her devoted husband. They detailed her month in hiding as evidence of mental instability, her wilderness birth as reckless endangerment of her child, and her accusations against Victor as the desperate attempts of a woman trying to explain away her own erratic behavior. But the newspapers were nothing compared to social media. Elena's story had gone viral overnight, but not in the way she had hoped. Memes mocked her claims, with photos of her disheveled appearance after the car crash, paired with sarcastic captions about survival stories. Twitter hashtags like Masha Crazy Wife and Masha Victor Deserves better trended nationally, while Facebook groups formed around discussions of whether Elena was lying or genuinely delusional. The cruelest posts focused on her pregnancy and her decision to give birth in hiding. Internet trolls called her an unfit mother, shared manipulated photos of her with David in the hospital, and created elaborate conspiracy theories about her motivations for faking her own death. Imagine being so desperate for attention that you'd endanger your own baby. Read one viral tweet that had been shared thousands of times. This woman needs help, not a custody battle. Elena's small lifestyle blog, Midlife Reflections, which she had maintained sporadically during her marriage, was overwhelmed with hateful comments. Readers who had previously enjoyed her posts about book club recommendations and home decorating tips now left vicious messages questioning her sanity, her motherhood, and her character. "I used to think you were relatable," wrote one former follower. "Now I see you're just another midlife crisis cliché who can't handle her husband moving on." The financial impact was immediate and devastating. 3 companies that had sponsored Elena's blog pulled their support within hours of the scandal breaking. Her small but steady income from affiliate marketing and sponsored posts disappeared overnight, leaving her completely dependent on Rebecca Chen's pro bono legal services and the charity of Margaret's support network. "This is what Victor wanted," Elena told Rebecca during one of their strategy sessions. "He knew that if he could make me look crazy, no one would believe anything I said about him." "It's a classic abuser tactic," Rebecca agreed. "Isolate the victim, undermine her credibility, make her appear unstable. But Elena, we have evidence. Facts don't care about public opinion. But facts," Elena was learning, were harder to communicate than emotions. While Victor appeared on sympathetic morning talk shows discussing his wife's breakdown and his commitment to getting her help, Elena was advised by her legal team to avoid media appearances that might be used against her in court. The isolation was suffocating. Elena found herself trapped in the hospital with David, unable to venture outside without being accosted by reporters and internet trolls. The nurses and doctors remained professional, but she could see the questions in their eyes, the doubt about whether the story she was telling could possibly be true. Her salvation came from an unexpected source, Marie. Elena's best friend had been following the news coverage with growing outrage, and she decided to take action. Marie organized Elena's book club, her neighbors, and several local women's groups to form what they called a truth circle around Elena's story. "I've known Elena Thompson for 15 years, Marie told anyone who would listen. "I was there when she discovered Victor's affair. I saw her pain, her confusion, her fear. This woman is not delusional. She's a survivor." The book club members became Elena's unofficial media team, flooding social media with counter-narratives that painted Elena as a victim of domestic violence rather than a mentally unstable attention seeker. They shared photos from their weekly meetings, showing Elena as the thoughtful, intelligent woman they knew her to be, not the disheveled figure from the crash scene that the media preferred to use. "We read Eat, Pray, Love together," posted Sandra, one of the book club members. "Elena talked about finding strength in midlife, about not being defined by other people's expectations. The woman I know is exactly the kind of person who would survive what she's been through." But even with growing support from women who knew her personally, Elena faced a devastating blow when leaked court documents revealed the extent of Victor's evidence against her. Victor's legal team had been busy during Elena's month in hiding, gathering testimonies from Elena's former colleagues, neighbors, and even her therapist that painted a picture of a woman struggling with midlife crisis depression, marriage dissatisfaction, and pregnancy-related anxiety. Mrs. Thompson often spoke about feeling invisible in her marriage, testified Dr. Patricia Williams, Elena's former therapist. The testimony had been taken out of context from Elena's sessions about normal midlife adjustment issues. But in the court documents, it sounded like evidence of serious mental health problems. She was concerned about aging, about her relevance, about competing with younger women. The testimony continued. "These are common concerns for women her age, but in Mrs. Thompson's case, they seem to be becoming obsessive." Elena felt betrayed all over again. Her honest discussions about the normal challenges of midlife had been weaponized against her, turned into evidence that she was prone to paranoid delusions about her husband's fidelity. The leaked documents were immediately picked up by bloggers and news aggregators, turning Elena's private therapy sessions into public entertainment. Comment sections filled with amateur psychology diagnoses and cruel speculation about her mental state. "Classic case of a woman who can't handle getting older," wrote one particularly vicious blogger. "She sees younger women everywhere as threats, creates elaborate fantasies to explain why her husband might prefer someone else. It's actually pretty sad." Elena's darkest moment came when she was alone in her hospital room late one night, scrolling through the endless stream of hate comments while David slept in his bassinet. The NICU doctors had finally cleared him for rooming in, which should have been a joyful milestone. Instead, Elena found herself wondering if her son would be better off without her. Maybe Victor's right, she whispered to the empty room, rain pattering against the window like tears. Maybe I am delusional. Maybe I'm just a middle-aged woman who can't handle reality. The self-doubt was crushing, more devastating than any of Victor's physical threats had been. Elena understood now why so many women stayed in abusive relationships, why they accepted their abuser's version of reality rather than trusting their own experiences. When the entire world seemed to agree that you were crazy, it became almost impossible to maintain faith in your own perceptions. But as Elena sat in that dark hospital room, feeling utterly defeated, she heard David stirring in his bassinet. She picked up her son, feeling his warm weight against her chest, and suddenly remembered why she had fought so hard to survive. "Your daddy is very good at making people believe what he wants them to believe," she whispered to David. "But I know the truth, and someday everyone else will know it too." Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I saw the news. I have information about Victor and Sophia. Can we meet?" Elena stared at the message, wondering if this was another trap, another manipulation designed to further undermine her credibility. But as she looked down at David's peaceful face, she realized she had to take the risk. Someone out there knew the truth, and Elena was going to find them. The mysterious text message led Elena to a meeting that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her husband's betrayal. The sender identified herself as Dr. Amanda Rivers, a forensic accountant who had been investigating Thompson Industries for the past 6 months as part of a Securities and Exchange Commission probe. "I can't officially involve myself in your custody case," Dr. Rivers explained as they met in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. "But what I can tell you is that your husband's financial crimes go far beyond supporting a mistress." Elena leaned forward, David sleeping peacefully in her arms. "What kind of crimes?" "Systematic embezzlement, money laundering, tax evasion, and securities fraud," Dr. Rivers listed. "Thompson Industries is essentially a shell company at this point. Victor has been moving assets overseas for years, preparing for what we believe was always intended to be his permanent disappearance." Disappearance. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. "Your husband was never planning to divorce you, Elena. He was planning to fake his own death, just like he tried to do to you. The difference is that his plan involved taking millions of dollars in investor money with him." Elena's mind reeled as Dr. Rivers explained the scope of Victor's operations. Thompson Industries had been taking investments for expansion projects that didn't exist, loans secured by assets that had already been sold, and government contracts that were completely fabricated. "How long has this been going on?" "We believe the scheme started about 8 years ago, around the time his relationship with Sofia Martinez began. She's not just his mistress, Elena. She's his accomplice. Her marketing consulting business has been laundering money for Thompson Industries since its inception." Elena thought about Isabella, the 7-year-old daughter who looked so much like Victor. "What about their child?" Dr. Rivers hesitated. "That's where things get complicated. We've been monitoring Sophia's communications, and we discovered something that might surprise you." "More surprises?" Elena muttered. "I'm not sure I can handle more surprises." "Isabella Martinez isn't Victor's daughter," Dr. Rivers said gently. "She's yours." Elena stared at the forensic accountant, certain she had misheard. "That's impossible. I've never had any other children." "Do you remember being hospitalized about 8 years ago? Some kind of emergency surgery?" Elena's memory clicked into place with horrible clarity. 8 years ago, she had been hospitalized for what Victor told her was emergency appendicitis. She had been in severe pain, rushed to surgery in the middle of the night, and had spent several days in recovery with surprisingly little memory of the immediate post-operative period. "They told me it was appendicitis," Elena whispered. "It was a cesarean section," Dr. Rivers said quietly. "We found the real medical records. You gave birth to a premature daughter who was immediately taken by Victor and given to Sophia to raise. Elena felt the world spinning around her. David stirred in her arms, as if sensing his mother's distress, but she could barely focus on his needs as the implications of Dr. Rivers' revelation crashed over her. "He stole my daughter," Elena said, her voice hollow with shock. "He performed some kind of, what, medical kidnapping. We believe you were drugged during the later stages of that pregnancy." Dr. Rivers explained, "Given something to induce early labor while you were unconscious or semi-conscious. The surgery was performed by a doctor who has since had his license revoked for participating in illegal adoption schemes." Elena's memories of that time were hazy, which she had always attributed to the pain medication and trauma of emergency surgery. But now she realized that her confusion and memory gaps had been deliberately induced. "Sophia knew?" Elena asked. "Sophia has been Victor's partner in everything from the beginning. They planned this entire scenario together, including your supposed death and their new life with both children." Elena looked down at David, then tried to imagine the daughter she had never known she had, Isabella, who was being raised to believe that Sophia was her mother and Elena was dead. Why would they do this? Why not just divorce me years ago and be together legitimately? Because divorce would have meant splitting assets, paying alimony, and facing scrutiny of Thompson Industries' finances. It was much easier to keep you in the dark while they built their escape plan. Elena felt a rage unlike anything she had ever experienced. The betrayal was so deep, so comprehensive, that it challenged her understanding of reality itself. Not only had Victor tried to kill her, but he had stolen her daughter and erased 8 years of motherhood from her memory. "There's more," Dr. Rivers said carefully. "We believe Victor is planning to disappear within the next few weeks. Our intelligence suggests he has new identities prepared for himself, Sophia, and both children. Once they leave the country, it will be nearly impossible to track them down or recover the stolen money." "Both children," Elena repeated numbly. "He's planning to take David too. The custody case is just a delaying tactic. Victor needs legal access to David to get him out of the country. Once he has that, all three of them will vanish." Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca Chen. "Emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Victor's lawyers are claiming you're an unfit mother who poses a danger to David. They want immediate full custody." Elena showed the message to Dr. Rivers, who shook her head grimly. "He's accelerating his timeline. Something must have spooked him." "Probably Sophia's arrest," Elena said. "If she's been talking to investigators." Actually, Sophia was released on bail this morning. Her lawyer negotiated a deal that requires her cooperation with our investigation, but she's free pending trial. Elena felt her last hopes crumbling. If Sophia was free, she and Victor could execute their escape plan at any time. And if Victor gained custody of David, Elena would lose both of her children forever. "I have to stop him," Elena said. But even as she spoke, she recognized the impossibility of her situation. How could she fight a man with unlimited resources, legal immunity from his carefully constructed public image, and accomplices who had been planning this escape for years? "Elena," Dr. Rivers said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What? Is there any part of you that doubts your own memories? Any possibility that the stress and trauma have affected your perceptions of what really happened?" Elena understood why Dr. Rivers had to ask. The story was so incredible, so elaborate, that it challenged belief. A husband who performed medical kidnapping, stole his wife's daughter, convinced her she had appendicitis, and then tried to kill her years later to complete his escape plan. It sounded like something from a psychological thriller, not real life. But as Elena looked down at David, she knew with absolute certainty that everything Dr. Rivers had told her was true. The gaps in her memory, the unexplained scars from her supposed appendicitis, Victor's strange behavior around certain anniversaries, and most importantly, the maternal instinct that had told her something was missing from her life, even when she couldn't identify what it was. I believe every word you've told me, Elena said, and I'm going to get my daughter back. But even as Elena spoke those words, she knew the odds were almost impossibly stacked against her. Victor had wealth, connections, legal expertise, and 8 years of careful planning. Elena had truth, determination, and a newborn baby who needed his mother's protection. The final confrontation was approaching, and Elena wasn't sure she was ready for what it would cost her. Elena's strategy session with Rebecca Chen took place at 5 a.m., hours before the emergency custody hearing that could determine David's future. Armed with Dr. Rivers' revelations, Elena felt a grim determination replacing the despair that had consumed her just days earlier. We have evidence of financial crimes, medical fraud, and conspiracy. Rebecca outlined, spreading documents across the conference table. But Victor's legal team will argue that all of this is circumstantial, that you're a desperate woman making increasingly elaborate accusations. What about the medical records from 8 years ago? Elena asked. Dr. Rivers said she had proof of the real surgery. Those records were obtained through an SEC investigation. Getting them admitted in a family court custody hearing will be challenging. Victor's lawyers will claim they're irrelevant to your current mental state and David's welfare. Elena felt the familiar frustration of being caught in a system designed to favor wealth and influence over truth. But this time, she had allies preparing to fight back. There's something else, Rebecca said, sliding a thick folder across the table. Marie and your book club have been busy. They've organized a comprehensive media campaign that's starting to shift public opinion. Elena opened the folder to find professionally designed graphics, social media posts, and newspaper op-eds that reframed her story as one of female empowerment and survival against domestic abuse. The contrast with the viral humiliation of the previous weeks was stark. Elena's fight when survival becomes resistance. The Thompson case. Why we must believe women. From victim to victor, one woman's refusal to stay dead. This is incredible, Elena said, reading through testimonials from other women who had experienced similar patterns of abuse and gaslighting. How did they organize all this so quickly? Your friend Marie is apparently a retired public relations executive, Rebecca explained. She's been calling in favors and building coalitions all week. The narrative is shifting. Elena, people are starting to see you as a survivor instead of a victim. Elena's phone buzzed with messages from supporters around the country. Women shared their own stories of midlife betrayal, financial abuse, and the struggle to be believed when reporting domestic violence. The hashtag #BelieveElena was trending, accompanied by photos of women holding signs with messages of support. I survived my husband's affair too. Elena gives me hope that justice is possible. 45 is not too old to start over. 45 is not too old to fight back. Mothers protect their children. Elena Thompson is protecting hers. The empowerment Elena felt from this support was unlike anything she had experienced. For months, she had felt isolated, dependent, and powerless. Now she was part of a movement, a symbol of resistance against men who believed they could discard inconvenient wives without consequences. But Victor's response to the shifting public opinion was swift and brutal. Elena arrived at the courthouse to find protesters on both sides of the steps. Victor's supporters, mostly well-dressed business professionals and country club wives, held signs reading, "Protect children from unstable mothers," and "Mental health before custody rights." Elena's supporters, a more diverse group of women from various backgrounds, countered with "Justice for Elena" and "Believe survivors." The hearing itself was a masterclass in legal warfare. Victor's team presented a comprehensive case for Elena's mental instability, using her therapy records, her month in hiding, and her increasingly elaborate accusations as evidence that she posed a danger to David's welfare. Your Honor, Jonathan Wells argued, Mrs. Thompson's claims have evolved from simple marital infidelity to elaborate conspiracy theories involving medical kidnapping, international money laundering, and attempted murder. This escalation of accusations is consistent with postpartum psychosis and paranoid delusion. Rebecca Chen's counterargument focused on the documented evidence of Victor's crimes and the pattern of abuse that explained Elena's behavior. Mrs. Thompson's actions were those of a woman protecting herself and her unborn child from a genuine threat, Rebecca stated. The evidence supports every aspect of her account, from the affair to the attempted murder to the systematic financial fraud. The testimony that followed was devastating for both sides. Dr. Rivers, appearing under subpoena, detailed the financial crimes that formed the foundation of Victor's deception. Her presentation of Thompson Industries' fraudulent activities was methodical and damning. But Victor's psychiatric expert, Dr. Marcus Reed, painted Elena's mental state in equally damaging terms. Mrs. Thompson presents classic symptoms of severe postpartum anxiety disorder, complicated by what appears to be a persecution complex, Dr. Reed testified. Her belief that her husband stole a previous child and performed medical kidnapping represents a complete break from reality. Elena watched the proceedings with growing dread. Despite all the evidence, the hearing was becoming a battle between competing narratives of reality. Victor's wealth and preparation were evident in every aspect of his legal presentation, while Elena's team struggled to make complex financial crimes understandable to a family court judge. The turning point came when Sofia Martinez was called to testify. Sofia's appearance in court was carefully calculated. She wore a conservative dark suit, minimal makeup, and an expression of reluctant cooperation. But as Rebecca Chen began her cross-examination, cracks in Sofia's composed facade began to show. Ms. Martinez, you've been granted immunity in exchange for your testimony, Rebecca began. Can you tell the court about your relationship with Victor Thompson? We had a business relationship that became personal, Sophia replied carefully. I provided marketing consulting services to Thompson Industries. For 8 years, yes. And during those 8 years, did you receive compensation beyond standard consulting fees? Sophia hesitated. Mr. Thompson was generous with bonuses. These bonuses totaling over $2 million over 8 years, according to bank records, for marketing consultation. Yes, Ms. Martinez, can you tell the court about Isabella? Isabella is my daughter. Who is her father? Another hesitation. I prefer not to discuss my daughter's paternity. Rebecca produced a court order. You're required to answer, Ms. Martinez. Who is Isabella's biological father? I don't know, Sophia said quietly. You don't know. Isabella was. She was conceived through artificial insemination. I was a surrogate mother. Elena felt the courtroom shift around her as the implications of Sophia's testimony became clear. A surrogate for whom, Rebecca pressed? For Victor and Elena Thompson. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Elena stared at Sophia, understanding flooding through her with horrible clarity. So Isabella is Elena Thompson's biological daughter. Rebecca continued, yes. And Elena was never told about the surrogacy arrangement. No, she was told the pregnancy terminated. Victor said it would be easier that way. Elena felt Rebecca's hand on her arm, steadying her as the truth of her stolen motherhood was finally revealed in open court. Every person in the courtroom now understood that Victor had not only stolen millions of dollars in attempted murder, but had also kidnapped his own wife's child and given her to his mistress to raise. Victor's face had gone white during Sophia's testimony. His lawyers huddled in frantic conference, but the damage was irreversible. Judge Patricia Morrison called for a recess, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. When court resumed, her ruling was swift and comprehensive. In 30 years on the bench, I have never encountered a case involving such systematic deception and abuse, Judge Morrison stated. Mr. Thompson, you are hereby ordered to surrender your passport, submit to psychiatric evaluation, and have all contact with both children supervised pending criminal investigation. Elena felt a surge of victory unlike anything she had ever experienced. David would remain with her, protected from Victor's schemes. Isabella would be returned to her care after DNA testing confirmed what Sophia had revealed, and Victor would face justice for his crimes. But as Elena left the courthouse surrounded by supporters and media, she couldn't shake the feeling that Victor's story wasn't over. A man who had planned so carefully for so long wouldn't accept defeat easily. The final chapter of their confrontation was yet to be written. 6 months after the custody hearing that changed everything, Elena's life had taken on a rhythm she never could have imagined. The modest apartment she shared with David and Isabella was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, bedtime stories, and the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had rebuilt her life from nothing. The transformation had been remarkable. Elena's therapy sessions, now focused on healing rather than survival, helped her process the trauma of Victor's betrayal while building the confidence she needed as a single mother. The support group that had formed around her case evolved into a nationwide network of women helping other survivors of domestic abuse and financial manipulation. "I never thought I'd say this," Elena told Dr. Chen during one of their sessions, "but I'm grateful for what happened. Not the pain, not the fear, but the discovery of who I really am when everything else is stripped away." Isabella's integration into Elena's life had been challenging, but ultimately joyful. The 8-year-old had struggled with confusion about her identity, loyalty conflicts between the only mother she had ever known and her biological mother, and anger about the lies that had shaped her young life. But children, Elena discovered, were remarkably resilient when surrounded by truth and love. "Mama Elena," Isabella said one evening as they read bedtime stories together, David sleeping peacefully in his crib nearby. "Am I really your daughter from before?" "You are," Elena replied, stroking Isabella's dark hair that was so much like her own. "You were born from my heart and my body, but I wasn't able to take care of you when you were a baby. Now I can, and I will never let anyone separate us again." The legal victories had continued to mount. Victor had been indicted on 17 federal charges, including fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy. The evidence gathered by Dr. Rivers and the SEC investigation painted a picture of systematic criminal behavior that went far beyond personal betrayal. Sophia's cooperation with prosecutors had resulted in a plea agreement that gave her supervised visitation with Isabella in exchange for her testimony against Victor. The arrangement was complicated, but Isabella seemed to understand that both women had been manipulated by Victor's schemes. Elena's financial situation had stabilized through an unexpected source. The book she had written about her experience, Dead Woman Walking: How I Survived My Husband's Murder Plot, had become a bestseller, resonating with women facing their own midlife crises and relationship challenges. The success felt surreal. Elena had gone from a financially dependent housewife to a woman with her own income, her own platform, and her own voice in the national conversation about domestic abuse and female empowerment. "You've become exactly what Victor was most afraid of," Marie observed during one of their weekly coffee meetings, now relocated to Elena's kitchen instead of their old cafe. "An independent woman who refuses to be silenced." Elena smiled, bouncing David on her lap while Isabella worked on homework at the kitchen table. "He tried to erase me, but he ended up creating the opposite of what he wanted." The media attention had largely shifted from sensational speculation to genuine admiration for Elena's resilience. Television interviews, podcast appearances, and speaking engagements kept her busy. But she was careful to maintain boundaries that protected her children's privacy and her own emotional health. Victor, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale. His arrest, trial, and eventual conviction for multiple felonies had destroyed Thompson Industries and left dozens of employees and investors facing financial ruin. The man who had once commanded respect in Chicago's business community was now serving a 12-year federal sentence. But even as Elena celebrated these victories, she couldn't completely let go of the hypervigilance that had kept her alive during the darkest period of her ordeal. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she confided to Dr. Chen. "Victor is brilliant, manipulative, and he doesn't accept defeat easily. Sometimes I feel like this peace is temporary, like he's planning something else." "That's a normal response to severe trauma," Dr. Chen assured her. "The hypervigilance will fade with time and continued safety. Victor is in federal prison. Elena, he can't hurt you anymore. Elena wanted to believe that, and most days she did. Her life was full, meaningful, and built on a foundation of truth rather than lies. She had her children, her work, her friends, and a sense of purpose that had been missing during her years as Victor's wife. The romantic aspect of her life had also begun to heal. Elena was dating Robert Harrison, a divorced father of two who had reached out to her after reading her book. Their relationship was cautious, honest, and built on mutual respect rather than the power dynamics that had characterized her marriage to Victor. "I love that you survived," Robert told her one evening as they walked through Grant Park with all four children. "But I love even more that you thrived." Elena's happiness felt almost too good to be true, which is why she should have paid more attention to the warning signs. The first indication that something was wrong came through Isabella. "Daddy called me," Isabella mentioned casually one evening as Elena helped her with a school project. Elena's blood ran cold. "Daddy called you? When? How?" "At school today. He said he wanted to tell me he was sorry and that he loved me." Elena immediately called the school, only to learn that no phone calls had been logged for Isabella that day. The prison confirmed that Victor had made no phone calls outside his approved list of legal contacts. "Isabella, sweetheart," Elena said carefully, "are you sure you talked to Daddy? Could it have been a dream or something you imagined?" "No, Mama Elena. He called my friend's phone during lunch. He said he had something special planned for Christmas." Elena's hands shook as she called Rebecca Chen, who immediately contacted federal authorities. But the investigation revealed no evidence of unauthorized prison communication, and Isabella's description of the conversation was vague enough to raise questions about whether it had actually occurred. "Children sometimes create conversations they wish they could have," the child psychologist explained. "Especially in cases involving parental incarceration. It's possible Isabella imagined the interaction, but Elena's instincts, honed by months of survival, told her otherwise." The second warning came in the form of financial anomalies. Elena's bank account showed small withdrawals that she hadn't made, always for amounts under $50, always from ATMs in different parts of the city. When she reported the discrepancies, her bank's investigation found evidence of sophisticated electronic manipulation that suggested professional hacking. "Someone is testing your security systems," the bank's fraud investigator explained. "These small withdrawals are often used to verify that account access is working before larger theft attempts." Elena changed all her passwords, closed several accounts, and moved her money to a different bank. But the message was clear: someone with advanced technical skills was watching her, probing her defenses, preparing for something larger. The third warning was the most disturbing. Elena woke one morning to find that someone had been in her apartment during the night. Nothing was stolen, nothing was obviously disturbed, but she could sense the intrusion in ways that were difficult to explain. A book moved slightly from where she had left it, a coffee cup positioned differently on the counter. The children's bedroom doors open when she was certain she had closed them. The police found no evidence of forced entry, no fingerprints, no signs of burglary. Elena's neighbors reported seeing nothing unusual, but Elena knew someone had been in her home while she and her children slept. "Victor is still in prison," Rebecca Chen reminded her when Elena called in a panic. "He's in federal custody, Elena. Maximum security. There's no way he could orchestrate something like this." But Elena remembered Dr. Rivers' warnings about Victor's extensive criminal network, his international connections, and his willingness to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. "What if he's not working alone?" Elena asked. "What if he has partners we never identified?" Rebecca promised to investigate, but Elena could hear the doubt in her voice. After months of victory and stability, Elena's fears seemed increasingly paranoid, reminiscent of the period when Victor had successfully portrayed her as mentally unstable. Elena tried to push down her anxiety, to focus on the positive aspects of her life and the security that surrounded her children. But late at night, when David and Isabella were asleep and the apartment was quiet, she found herself listening for sounds that shouldn't be there, watching for shadows that moved too purposefully. The feeling that she was being watched, studied, and targeted grew stronger each day. Victor might be in prison, but Elena was beginning to suspect that his final gambit was still in motion. And this time, she might not see it coming until it was too late. Elena's book launch party at the Chicago Literary Society was everything she had dreamed of during her darkest moments in hiding. 200 guests mingled in the elegant hall, celebrating not just the success of Dead Woman Walking, but the extraordinary transformation of a woman who had refused to stay buried. Isabella, now 9 years old and confident in her identity as Elena's daughter, helped arrange the flower centerpieces with the serious concentration she brought to everything important. David, a healthy and happy 15-month-old, charmed guests from his stroller, while Elena signed books and shared her story with supporters from across the country. "You've given so many women hope," said Patricia Williams, one of the domestic violence advocates who had traveled from Los Angeles for the event. "Your story proves that it's never too late to reclaim your life." Elena smiled graciously, but part of her attention remained focused on the security measures Robert had insisted upon. 2 off-duty police officers mingled with the crowd, the venue's exits were monitored, and Elena's assistant maintained a careful guest list. After months of strange incidents and unexplained intrusions, they were taking no chances with her safety. The evening proceeded flawlessly until Elena noticed a familiar face in the crowd that made her blood freeze. Dr. Marcus Reed, the psychiatrist who had testified for Victor during the custody hearing, stood near the back of the room, watching Elena with an intensity that seemed completely inappropriate for a book launch. "Robert," Elena whispered to her boyfriend, who was helping manage the book signing line. "Dr. Reed is here, Victor's psychiatrist." Robert's expression darkened as he scanned the crowd. "I see him. Stay calm, but let's wrap this up soon." But before Elena could respond, Dr. Reed approached the signing table with a book in his hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulations on your remarkable recovery, Mrs. Thompson," he said, placing the book in front of her. "I must admit, your transformation has been quite extraordinary." Elena's hand trembled slightly as she opened the book, but instead of finding blank pages for signing, she discovered a letter written in Victor's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Elena," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then my final gift to you has been successfully delivered. I hope you have enjoyed our game, but it's time for the truth about what really happened." Elena's vision blurred as she read, the words threatening to destroy everything she believed about her victory over Victor's schemes. "You were never supposed to survive the car accident, but your survival created opportunities I never anticipated. Did you really think I didn't know where you were during those months in hiding? Thomas Murphy has been reporting to me for years. Every detail of your pregnancy, your birth, your plans. I knew everything." Elena looked up at Dr. Reed, who was watching her reaction with clinical fascination. Around them, the party continued, but Elena felt as if she were trapped in a nightmare. "You see," the letter continued, "I needed you to discover the affair, to feel betrayed, to fight back. I needed you to become the strong, independent woman who could raise our children without my support. Because I'm dying. Elena. Terminal pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 3 years ago. I have perhaps 6 months left to live." Elena's hands shook as she continued reading, her worldview crumbling with each revelation. "Everything you discovered about Sophia, about Isabella, about my business crimes, all of it was true, but it was also deliberate. I orchestrated your journey from victim to survivor because I needed to ensure that our children would be raised by a woman strong enough to protect them from what's coming." "What's coming?" Elena whispered, and Dr. Reed leaned closer. "Keep reading," he said quietly. "You see, my dear wife, Thompson Industries was never my only business interest. The offshore accounts you discovered represent only a fraction of my actual wealth. The real money, the real power, lies in ventures that I can't simply abandon, even in death. There are people who will come looking for that inheritance, people who won't hesitate to harm our children to get what they want." Elena felt the room spinning around her as the implications became clear. I staged my own downfall to give you the tools you would need to fight them. Your book, your platform, your network of supporters. These weren't accidental successes. Elena, they were carefully orchestrated to ensure that when my enemies come for our children, you won't be a helpless housewife hiding in the suburbs. You'll be a woman with resources, connections, and the survival skills to protect what matters most. Dr. Reed reached across the table and gently closed the book, ending Elena's reading of the letter. Victor wanted me to explain the rest in person, he said. May we speak privately? Elena looked around the party, at Isabella helping other children with the activity station, at David sleeping peacefully in his stroller, at Robert chatting with guests who had become her support network. Her entire new life, everything she had built from the ashes of Victor's betrayal, suddenly felt like an elaborate stage production designed for her benefit. The cancer is real, Dr. Reed explained as they moved to a quiet corner of the hall. Victor has been receiving treatment in prison, but he's refused aggressive interventions that might extend his life. He believes he has perhaps 2 months remaining. And his enemies, Elena asked, her voice hollow. Very real, very dangerous, and completely unaware that Victor has been planning his succession for 3 years. When he dies, they'll come looking for approximately $50 million in assets that are hidden in accounts only you can access. Elena stared at Dr. Reed in shock. I can't access Victor's accounts. I don't know anything about $50 million. You will, Dr. Reed replied, handing her a small envelope. When Victor dies, you'll receive instructions that will give you control of enough money to ensure your children's safety and security for life. But it will also make you a target for some very dangerous people. Why are you telling me this? Elena demanded. Why should I believe anything you say? Because Isabella isn't your only child with Victor. Dr. Reed said quietly. The boy you knew as David, his DNA doesn't match yours. Elena, David is Isabella's half-brother, but not your biological son. Your actual second child, a daughter named Sarah, has been living with protective custody for the past year under a false identity. Elena felt her legs give out as the weight of this revelation crashed over her. She sank into a nearby chair, struggling to process information that challenged every assumption about her life. The baby I gave birth to in Thomas's cabin, Elena whispered, was David Martinez, Sophia's son from a previous relationship. Victor arranged the switch during the confusion following your supposed death. Your daughter Sarah was born 2 weeks later in a private facility, and she's been protected ever since. Elena's mind reeled as she tried to understand the scope of Victor's manipulation. Even her greatest triumph, saving her son from Victor's custody schemes, had been an illusion. The child she had bonded with, nursed, and protected was not even her biological son. Where is she? Elena asked. Where is Sarah? Safe and for now, but when Victor dies, her location will be revealed to you along with the financial accounts. Your job will be to bring her home and use Victor's resources to protect all 3 children from the people who will come looking for their inheritance. Elena looked across the room at David, who had awakened and was reaching for her with chubby arms and a trusting smile. Biology aside, he was her son in every way that mattered. But knowing that somewhere in the world was another child, her biological daughter, who needed her protection added another layer of complexity to an already impossible situation. What am I supposed to do with this information? Elena asked. Prepare, Dr. Reed replied simply. Use the next 2 months to strengthen your security, expand your network, and get ready for a battle that will make your fight with Victor look like a warm-up exercise. Elena returned to the party, but everything felt surreal, as if she were watching herself from outside her body. The celebration of her independence and survival now seemed hollow, knowing that it had all been orchestrated as training for an even greater challenge. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Elena found herself holding David while Isabella helped clean up, both children unaware that their lives were about to change again in ways Elena couldn't even predict. Robert approached with concern evident in his expression. You look pale. What did that doctor say to you? Elena looked at the man she had come to love, knowing that she was about to face choices that would test every relationship in her new life. How could she explain that her victory over Victor had been an illusion, that her children were in danger from enemies she didn't understand, and that she was about to inherit enough money to make her a target for violence she couldn't imagine? I need to tell you something, Elena said quietly. Something that changes everything. As Elena prepared to reveal Victor's final manipulation, she realized that her story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The woman who had survived her husband's murder attempt was about to discover that staying dead might have been safer than coming back to life. But Elena Thompson had learned to survive the impossible once before, and she would do it again, because her children's lives depended on it. The real battle was about to begin.